Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something absolutely fascinating, the multifaceted and honestly seemingly contradictory nature of Lord Krishna. Now, if you're already familiar with the ancient Indian epics, you definitely know Krishna is a central figure. But today, we're not just recounting old stories. We are decoding a practical, brilliant framework for living. So think about this for a second, because this is the core paradox we're tackling today. How does the exact same figure embody both a ruthless, pragmatic battlefield strategist and the ultimate flute-playing divine lover? It just seems completely counterintuitive, right? I mean, how on earth do you reconcile the grand architect of the Kurukshetra War with the protagonist of the Rasa Leela? Well, here's our roadmap for figuring that out. First, we'll look at the 16 Kala avatar. Second, the master strategist. Third, timeless management principles. Fourth, the ultimate devotion. And finally, uniting action and devotion. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the 16 Kala avatar, and understanding Purnata. Look at this contrast here. It's really brilliant. On one hand, you have Lord Rama, known as Maryada Purushottam, who manifested 12 to 14 kalas, or dimensions of divine power. His whole role was to show how a human should live by strictly following rules and societal boundaries to defeat Ravana. But the era of the Mahabharata, the Dwapara Yuga, it was completely different. It was incredibly morally gray. The evil was actually inside the family. So Lord Krishna, the Leela Purushottam, he required the absolute fullness of divine wisdom to navigate this mess. He had to transcend human rules to establish a much higher spiritual truth. So what are these divine attributes? We're talking about compassion, justice, detachment, invincibility, beauty, and omniscience. But the real kicker here is the balance. As our sources point out, compassion without justice, that just becomes weakness. Meditation without detachment, that turns into ego. Krishna's life proves that true spirituality involves actually mastering the world, being fully in the trenches of politics, war, and family, while somehow remaining entirely detached. And that brings us to this specific number, 16. This emphasizes the concept of purnata, literally complete fullness. To put that into perspective, Vedic thought suggests that ordinary humans operate with about 8 kalas. So 16, that is the ultimate goal, the absolute pinnacle of evolution. Which naturally brings us to Section 2, the master strategist and winning the Mahabharata. Let's see how this plays out in a war zone. When you look at this breakdown, it's honestly mind-blowing. Krishna bent the strict rules of Dharma to neutralize powerful enemies, and his tactics map perfectly to modern diplomacy. For instance, to defeat the invincible Bhishma, Krishna used Shikhandi, who was born female, as a shield, completely exploiting Bhishma's vow to never fight a woman. In today's terms, that's neutralizing an adversary through their emotional vulnerabilities. To defeat Drona, he used strategic deception about Drona's son, which is basically modern information warfare. And to strip Karna of his divine armor, he leveraged Karna's greatest strength, his vow of charity. That's the ancient equivalent of leveraging a nation's economic dependencies against itself. We even see him dismantle Jarasanda's entire empire through pure intelligence-based strategic operations. All right, moving right along to Section 3, timeless management principles, ancient epics, modern leadership. You know, it's no surprise at all that modern academic and corporate environments are rapidly adopting Krishna's leadership style. The Bhagavad Gita isn't just some dusty ancient text, it is a profound, practical manual on crisis management and purpose-driven action. Just think about it. We're looking at strategic foresight, emotional intelligence, ethical flexibility, resource optimization. Krishna was a total chameleon. He adapted his style based purely on the situation. With Arjuna, he's a supportive coach. With Duryodhana, a neutral diplomat. With the Pandavas, a grand strategist. This is exactly what a modern crisis manager has to do today. He showed ethical flexibility to uphold higher moral principles and optimized his resources so the numerically smaller Pandava army could actually win. Let's switch gears a bit for Section 4, the ultimate devotion, and Radha's selfless love. We're pivoting from war and politics to Krishna as the ultimate object of devotion. As this beautiful quote captures, the supreme emotion, Mahabhava, is the quintessence of prem. Radha is the personification of this supreme emotion. She abandons all idea of self and seeks Krishna's enjoyment. Devotion here isn't transactional. You're not putting coins in a vending machine expecting a spiritual reward. It is a completely selfless outpouring of love. Radha literally represents the pure soul, asking for absolutely nothing but surrender. To really wrap our heads around this abstract concept, listen to this amazing anecdote. Krishna decides to set up a test. He fakes this severe, terrible stomachache and tells his royal wives that the only cure is to drink water that's been used to wash the feet of a true devotee. And the contrast is wild. His royal wives, the Pat Ranis, they flat out refused. Why? Because giving foot water to the Lord is considered a massive sin, and they were terrified of going to hell. They prioritized their own spiritual safety. But Radha, when the messenger reached her, she didn't even blink. She offered the water instantly. She was fully willing to accept eternal damnation as long as her beloved was cured. Literally, the ultimate ego death. So when we define the Rasa Leela like this, not as some earthly romance, but as the soul's intense yearning for spiritual union, it completely changes the paradigm, doesn't it? When Krishna played his flute, the gopis left everything behind. This wasn't human infidelity. It represents the soul's shedding all its worldly desires and societal conditioning when it hears the call of the divine. Which brings us perfectly to our final piece, Section 5, Uniting Action and Devotion, the synthesis. How do the strategist and the lover coexist in us? Well, look at the analogy of Krishna's flute. Step 1. Empty yourself of your worldly ego. Step 2, become a pure, hollow vessel. And step 3, allow yourself to be filled entirely with the divine's music. You see, a flute only makes beautiful music because it is completely hollow inside. Whether we're leading a company or seeking spiritual enlightenment, the goal is to burn up our selfish ego. We fight the war without hatred and we love without asking for a reward. They're just two sides of the exact same 16 kala perfection. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. How will you apply these 16 kalas to master both the strategic battles and the selfless devotion in your own modern life? Because true power comes from aligning our actions with the greater good, while remaining totally detached from the outcome. We all have our own personal Kurukshitras to fight, and we all have a soul yearning for the infinite. Master both. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.